The evergreen wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, arresting, unchanging, and shrouded in natural mystique. Twin Peaks portrayed the enthralling atmosphere of a cozy town in Washington state with a supernatural twist. This strongly resonated with me personally as someone who grew up in the area. For years, nothing could quite replicate that magic, whether in film or games, when, without warning, Finnish game developers shared this dream with us. Remedy Entertainment first dazzled us with Max Payne's noir style and slow-mo shootouts in 2001 and 2003, and their commitment to quality over quantity was self-evident. After 8 years and the conclusion of the Max Payne saga, it was time for something new, ambitious, and fresh. E3 2005 revealed Remedy's vision, where towering evergreens pierce the misty sky and dark secrets slumber beneath an emerald blanket. The idyllic town of Bright Falls, Washington is home to shadowy forces lurking in the night, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. The premise resonated instantly, a Twin Peaks-esque setting with Alan Wake, a popular horror author not unlike Stephen King. To his dismay, he soon discovers the power to reshape the world through the written word. The trailer shows Alan traversing Bright Falls by foot or by car, days and nights flashing by in real time as this beautiful forest retreat reacts to every sunray and shadow. Originally, Alan was depicted as a tragic figure who struggled with writer's block following his wife and muse's mysterious disappearance. He escaped to the Pacific Northwest to recover and heal from his loss. Remedy's new project caught Microsoft's attention, leading to a publishing deal for an Xbox 360 exclusive release. By E3 2006, they'd made significant progress, though later reports suggest that the core gameplay was largely unfinished. Alan's appearance evolved, ditching the European-style overcoat and red scarf for the now iconic jacket-hoodie combo and a more disheveled look. The trailer teased intriguing concepts while leaving game mechanics up to interpretation, but the concept of a horror novelist cursed to manifest his deepest, darkest nightmares is truly terrifying. We saw brief glimpses of in-engine footage, which alluded to the game's survival focus at the time. Hinted here is the now iconic use of light as a deterrent against the cultish enemies who emerge from the darkness. A lantern can be seen here as a core component to gameplay, but was scrapped in favor of the flashlight near release. Later that year, at the Xbox Expo, select media outlets received a closed-door demo of an early build of the game, with at least one crash reported. In this demo, Alan writes a chapter about a murderous hitchhiker, only to pick someone up needing a lift while driving later that day. Compelled to share his recent work, an uneasy Alan listens in creeping terror as the passenger finishes his sentences word for word. A brutal roadside accident claims the passenger's life, leaving Alan unconscious on the road. Awakening in darkness, he rummages around with a flashlight, only to hear the deceased hitchhiker's voice calling his name from the shadows.
You must finish what you started.
Who's there?
Despite the press often labeling the game survival horror, Remedy instead preferred the descriptor cinematic action thriller. This hitchhiker scenario, originally a chilling encounter, was repurposed in the final game as the opening dream sequence. This serves as a tutorial with no story context at all, where he mocks Wake as a hack writer while demonstrating basic attacks, dodges, and the light mechanic to the player. At the Intel Developer Forum that year, presenters showcased the game's custom engine and impressive feature set. Remedy confirmed a massive 100 square kilometer world, explorable without zoning or loading screens. This was nearly 3 times the size of GTA San Andreas, released just 2 years earlier. They demonstrated dynamic weather like wind and fog, as well as volumetric lighting, activated at any moment during gameplay. And real-time tornadoes could tear apart buildings and fling cars around thanks to Havok physics. Extremely impressive for 2006, but these technical achievements went underutilized in the final game. Instead, time of day and these forces of nature were scripted to occur at specific points in smaller, segregated maps to maintain a tighter narrative and design. At E3 2007, we saw an early voiced trailer with a different actor than launch and several key clues as to the story and themes of Alan's journey.
My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer. This story was meant to be a work of fiction, but everything in it is now horribly true. You'll think I'm crazy, but it's vital that I deliver this morning before it's too late. Time is running out. I was working on a story about a writer who, after a tragic loss, goes to live in a secluded cabin. And there he writes a horror story about creatures of darkness disguised as men. When he leaves the cabin, he discovers that the world has turned into the nightmare he's written.
We hear Alan's therapist urge him toward acceptance. It's all in your head. This isn't real. You're making this up, he claims. This version of the story leans heavily into the psychological horror aspect of Alan Wake, a depressed widower seeking help to overcome his grief and loss. These therapy sessions were seemingly meant to bring a shadow of doubt to Alan's experiences as the insomniac loses his grip on reality. While in the 2010 version, Alan immediately disbelieves Dr. Hartman and exposes him as a fraud. Tango Gameworks also explored this theme in The Evil Within. In this series, Sebastian enters a virtual reality construct and battles the horrors projected from his own mind, all the while struggling with his own PTSD, survivor's guilt, and questioning what is real and what is a delusion. The 2007 trailer teases the game's mysteries further, with sinister whispers from the Taken. These dark entities are aware that Alan's manuscript created them whole cloth and demand that he finishes writing this unfolding nightmare.
There is a miracle. Alan, wake up.
You must finish what you started.
Hey, who's there? What are you?
You called us here.
A fervorous woman's voice proclaims a miracle, again hinting at a cultish aspect to the story, suggesting that Wake and his powers of reality bending make him into a messianic figure in the eyes of his pursuers. Here we could draw parallels to Midnight Mass, where devout churchgoers witness inexplicable and horrific events and interpret them as a revelation, both exploring the power of conviction and the dangers of zealotry. This theme is realized a bit in the Alan Wake sequel, with the so-called Cult of the Word and Cult of the Tree. Both perform rituals and executions inspired by Wake's actions, but they aren't crucial to the story other than providing more enemies to shoot and Mind Palace insights. A struggling novelist named Alan Wake is analogous to Remedy writer Sam Lake, known for his love of meta and eccentricity. Alan's plight to complete his novel mirrors the team's struggle to finish the game he stars in. His name, both clever and contrived, doubles as a pun.
Alan, wake up.
And the chilling hook, "The only thing worse than not sleeping is being awake," is discarded after the first scene in the actual game. Alan's insomnia is underdeveloped and plays no role in the story's progression. One would think a sleep-deprived creative type would become tormented by the blurred lines between reality and imagination. There's a great opportunity here to tailor the environments and enemies in order to personify Alan's deepest fears, desires, and guilt, taking a page out of Silent Hill 2's masterful reflection of James Sunderland's mind in the form of the twisted monstrosities and visions he encounters. The original plot put Alan as the author of his own destiny, but in the final version of the game's story, he becomes a victim of words he did not recall writing.
I remembered it all now. In the dark, I'd written for days, a week, almost a complete manuscript of a novel entitled Departure. Jagger had been my editor, whispering in my ear, making sure that the unfolding story would make her more and more powerful.
A big story reveal tells us that poet Thomas Zane harnessed Cauldron Lake's power to save his wife in the 1960s, and through a deceptive twist, inadvertently summoned a dark entity disguised in her form. In modern day, she manipulates Alan into coming to the lake and writing a manuscript that serves her purpose. Then she erases his memory. The story even suggests that Zane wrote Alan into existence, further undermining his agency. But what's more captivating, a character shaping reality through the writing, or reality being influenced by a manuscript he didn't consciously create? Alan bearing the consequences of actions he can't remember makes him more of a pawn in this story, rather than a player.
I'm happy. I'm having quite a difficult mess with Arcane.
Do you read Sutter Kane?
John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness also explores this concept. An insurance investigator and a book editor delve into the author Sutter Kane's sudden disappearance right before his anticipated new release. They travel to Hobbs End, a made-up town in Kane's books, and uncover the unsettling truth that his writings have brought the town, its people, and monstrous secrets to life. The editor now has an uncanny ability to predict future events based on her recollection of Kane's writing, but the villagers are damned to obey his every keystroke.
I have to, he wrote me this way.
Imagine if Alan Wake's power was a tangible gameplay mechanic. Players could typewrite direct influence into the world. Each page could create new locations, alter characters, and spur exploration during the daytime hours around Bright Falls, or form dangerous objectives to tackle come nightfall. They tease this concept in Alan Wake 2's plot board, where you can choose from different passages at specified story points. This creates a sense of altering reality in real time, but it still doesn't live up to the game's fascinating premise. Whether it's conjuring an opening through debris, a radio, or other such change to the environment, this feature treats creative writing like a puzzle to be solved. Just like the first game, there is only one way forward, boiling these down to get-out-of-jail-free cards. If granting Alan these powers sounds like it would remove all conflict from the story, imagine Cauldron Lake acting like a djinn. Alan's good intentions could have dire consequences when interpreted maliciously by the Dark Presence. We're told that the Presence attracts talented artists as vessels for writing its wicked plans into reality. What if the potency of this washed-up novelist's work depended on its quality? Say he tried to write himself out of danger by summoning aid or eliminating roadblocks miraculously via contrivances. Major plot holes in his writing could even damage the fabric of reality that he would scramble to repair in redrafts. The story at launch shows a mysterious force that blocks Alan from writing, effectively eliminating his role as a novelist until the finale.
For me, the supernatural had always been nothing but a metaphor for the human psyche, a tool to use in writing fiction. Now, it was happening for real, and I couldn't put a single word on paper.
Initially, Alan Wake unveiled a third-person horror game set in an open-world town with surrounding wilderness. The trailers presented an expansive network of roads, vistas, and buildings making up Bright Falls, traversable by vehicle, and we can see the leftovers of this discarded material in the final product. Why else go through the effort of coding, modeling, and animating several vehicles and miles of landscape in what is at its core a corridor shooter? The vehicle segments at launch felt out of place. Sparse, brief cruises before you're roadblocked, forcing you to be on foot again. Alan Wake's campaign is also unrecognizable from these early presentations. The balance between nocturnal gunfights and daytime interludes, mostly told through cutscenes, is about 4-to-1. We even experience the nightmare world before we see the opening cutscene introducing Alan and his predicament. One would think we'd see Bright Falls in its normalcy first, so when we see the strange, otherworldly happenings in the dark, it comes off as wrong. Many locations went underutilized or forgotten. The gas station was originally a place to get keys to your cabin and to fuel your car and generators. And the bookstore was going to host an Alan Wake book signing. If you activate the free camera mode, you can zoom out and scour miles of landscape, infrastructure, roads, and buildings barely seen in the final game, or used as mere nighttime props. The churches, stores, balconies, houses, docks, and countless other locales give meaning and contrast to the supernatural action. But our view of this world is so narrow, and mostly peered at through fog and darkness, that the player is absolutely starved of context, and there's little reprieve from running around in the woods shooting possessed lumberjacks for hours. How does Bright Falls operate normally? Who are these town people in their day-to-day lives? How are some taken by the Dark Presence while others resist the call? Who is Agent Nightingale or Dr. Hartman, and why are they touted as major antagonists, only to disappear in an instant, like a villain of the week on a TV show?
So to go with that was already the idea of light and dark as key elements, and early on that key element took the shape of dynamic day and night cycle in this free-roaming open world. I just felt that we kind of started moving away from the idea of having this grounding factor of a normal world as part of this setting, this quirky, idyllic small town. We were kind of drifting away from that, and more the gameplay elements we were looking at started to support the idea that, well, if you know that the nighttime will be full of danger and horrors, then it makes sense for you during daytime to prepare for nighttime. And it started more and more be this survival thing. The idea that you are driving around in this world, looking for resources, getting gasoline for a portable generator, and bringing lights and hooking the lights up and creating this safe place where you can defend yourself during nighttime.
Remember, these survival mechanics developed up through 2007 predated even Minecraft. So this was all still fresh and innovative, before the slog of knockoff games filled Steam's storefront. Around 2008, the team made the difficult choice to completely revamp the game into what it is now.
In this period of time, Alan Wake went from free-roaming open world with dynamic day and night cycle to a linear experience. We still had this world, this map that we had built. Essentially then we went into the map, and out of that we carved out levels, these linear levels.
This is when a lot of the core gameplay fell into place, including the final iteration of light as a weapon. But peeking underneath thematic framing, the flashlight functions similarly to charge-up weapons like the torque bow in Gears of War, and the flare gun behaves identically to a grenade launcher. Inspired by the TV show Lost, Remedy was insistent on presenting the game like a TV series. They initially planned to release episodes digitally, similar to the later Telltale Games model, but Microsoft vetoed the idea, and the scars still remain. Lost may have inspired the mystery box revamping of the game's story, and dropping a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter gives the game a repetitive and formulaic rhythm. Starting a chapter erases your equipment every time, removing any sense of preparation, progress, or permanence, and makes the world feel even more contained. There are many parallels here to the often bemoaned Alone in the Dark reboot from 2008. It had an open-world city and wilderness you could traverse by foot and by car. Similar to Wake's impressive lighting system, a dynamic fire system was implemented here, used to permanently kill your shadowy enemies. Alone in the Dark even had a previously on recap before each chapter, just like another title.
Previously on Alan Wake, I'm hunted by the law.
Sheriff, Wake's running. I'm giving chase.
Are you seriously telling me that Ryder just took out my deputies?
A thriller I supposedly wrote is coming true.
The open world and daylight system, as Alan gathers resources, collects clues, and prepares for nightfall, could have added a compelling aspect of fear and tension to the game, similar to Dying Light, when the infected horde becomes stronger and more aggressive after sundown. But for Alan Wake, the end result is unfortunately clear. They transformed the open-world Twin Peaks adventure survival experience into Max Payne with flashlights. Cutscenes almost mock the original concept of daytime exploration, treating it as a pesky intermission.
I had never been this glad to see the sunrise. I had a couple of hours to get to the coal mine. The coal mine wasn't far now.
A publisher breathing down your neck for nearly 5 years and little more than a tech demo to show for it calls for desperate measures. Going back to a 2-time proven gameplay loop was probably the winning play here. Would an open world elevate Alan Wake into a masterpiece? Maybe, maybe not. Critics raked Alone in the Dark over the coals for its repetitive endgame activities and flawed execution, and a solid release is infinitely better than a cancelled game. But just 3 months before Alan Wake released, Deadly Premonition embraced a dynamic day-night system, NPC schedules, and an even stronger Twin Peaks influence. Its dated presentation, rough combat, and melodramatic storytelling obscured the atmospheric mystery underneath. And while Alan Wake won over critics, Deadly Premonition seemed to attract an even stronger cult following for its hidden depth and ambition. Ironically, the last words spoken in Alan Wake's ending suggest a vastness to something smaller or limited. Here it's referring to Cauldron Lake, but it's strangely symbolic of the game that landed on store shelves versus its original scope and premise.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
American Nightmare reused a lot of the assets from the cancelled Alan Wake 2 prototype. The standalone expansion combined story ideas, teased at the end of Alan Wake, such as Alan's evil doppelganger, Mr. Scratch, and almost acted as the epitaph for the original game's concept. Of course, we saw a very different vision for Wake's long-awaited sequel, but Remedy's overindulgent style and cinematic execution had become even more pronounced in the 13-year gap between the two games. Quantum Break had extended, Netflix-style, live-action cutscenes, jarring, even to those who enjoyed the game's physics-bending action. Remedy's attempt to blur the line between TV and games would continue to intrigue and divide their player base. Control completely shifted the company's MO, turning their work into the Remedy Connected Universe. Now Alan Wake and the Federal Bureau of Control somehow coexist in this kitchen sink world, where anything supernatural is possible. These purposefully convoluted storylines are tailor-made with wiki warriors in mind, as if designed for those obsessed with lore deep dives, shared universes, and piecing together referential minutiae, regardless of the quality of character or plot writing. Alan Wake 2 is a visual feast and develops some of the darker aspects of the setting, but it brings in another Sam Lake stand-in. Alex Casey, voiced by the legendary James McCaffrey, essentially forces Max Payne into this universe too. Modern Remedy is now laser-focused on narrow, scripted scenarios, broken up by Jesse's inner thoughts, Saga's incessant Mind Palace cutscenes, or frequent live-action interludes. These take the form of anything from the dreaded fear flashes, monologuing silhouettes, to TV show specials, and even song and dance numbers. Remedy's new formula is wowing us with spectacular set pieces and intriguing lore, while further plunging into a very expensive niche. As the products continue to feel more like B movies than A games, will they hold up in the uncomfortable comparison to actual film and television? The original Alan Wake pitch, a psychological thriller about a novelist escaping to the woods only to find his deepest, darkest nightmares realized, is likely never going to see the light of day. What should be considered a good game is now forever etched in my mind as what could have been. Depressing, but somehow fitting. Reality doesn't always reflect what you put down on paper. This has been Indigo Gaming. Thank you for watching.